Welcome to the 80s and 90s presents 99, where every day is a party like it's 1999. Here's your hosts, Jamie Fenderson and Milo Dennison.
So what we're doing here, we do need to say a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. So we've each got 4 tech companies that went public in 1999. Jamie's got 2. I've got 2. Some of these tech companies have stayed around. Some you've probably never heard of.
Yeah, well, I thought we had 4 each.
We do, 4. That's why I said 4.
I know, but you said 2.
It's not about what I say, Jamie. It's about what I mean. How?
Okay.
Come on.
Okay, sorry, dude.
It's about what the title of the episode is.
Okay.
Fine, 4 tech companies. We've each got 4 tech companies.
I'm sorry I didn't read your mind there. Like,
come on.
Whatever.
How long have we been recording this crap? You should know that by now.
Yeah. Well, 99 was interesting because that was kind of the middle end of the .com boom. So if you don't know what the .com boom was, it was like that where all these tech companies went IPO, and it was just like this big, irrationally exuberant time. And a number of these companies we're going to talk about, some of them, like you said, we might know, some of them we didn't know, went IPO. And my first one is called NVIDIA.
I believe I've heard of NVIDIA.
Yeah. Well, I know about it because when you right click and you want to change the way your screen looks on your laptop, it goes NVIDIA display. And then you go into that and you can configure the way your display looks on your laptop. That's why I know it. So NVIDIA is a GPU. So they do graphic processing units. So think about Intel as a CPU. NVIDIA is the graphical version of that. So it was founded by some guys in 1993, and they were all chip designers, a lot of them for AMD and Sun Microsystems. And they were like, hey, man, there's a lot of graphical problems to solve, especially with all this video game action coming out, right? And they founded this company to kind of solve a lot of those kind of graphical problems. And they found, did you know they found it? They only had $40,000 in the bank when they found this. Wow. When they founded this company. Can you believe it? And now they're the most prominent graphic processing unit producer in the world, right? And they started out with $40,000.
Wow, good for them.
Isn't that cool? I always like to hear that story because it's kind of fun. Now there's all kinds of how I don't know how chips work very well, but again they later they got some capital and they started really going, and they went IPO in 1999, which is the same year they released something called GeForce 256, which was some kind of crazy 3D hardware stuff. So by 1999, they were doing pretty well. They were doing some pretty awesome stuff. And I think a lot of the video game coolness that we saw in the late 90s, if you look back, it's probably has a lot to do with the work that these guys did. Yeah, now they're into deep learning and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't even know, but they're around still and they're killing it. But they went IPO in 1999.
I've owned stock in NVIDIA.
Really?
I currently don't. Yeah, I sold it. Did pretty well on it. I didn't. Unfortunately, I didn't really buy at the IPO point because that was 1999. But
yeah,
over the past few years, yeah, I did buy some and sold it and did pretty well.
Our lives, this company, it's part of our lives, whether we know it or not. Now they're killing it. Good job, guys.
My first one is going to be MapQuest. So this might be something people might not have heard of, but probably have heard of, but I don't know how many people have necessarily used it. But I used to use it all the time back in the day, before Google Maps came out. They were the shit. And I really liked the MapQuest, the way the site worked. And it was really nice. They were founded in 1996. They IPO'd in 1999, February 25th. For a while, did really well. They had a great mapping service. I think even the first few years of Google Maps didn't work as well as MapQuest did. Unfortunately, they've really kind of gotten downhill since then. AOL bought them in 2015. And then I think AOL sold them at some point in time. Yet they are still around. TomTom's uses MapQuest. So there are some systems. I think they do have some other travel products like Gas Buddy, which I don't know, I'm guessing gives you nearby gas prices by the title of it. Oh, well, but that's basically it. That's MapQuest. It was a precursor to Google Maps. Lots of people used it until Google Maps took over.
Yeah, I remember like mid to late 90s, MapQuest was the thing you used. Like it was the shiznit, right? It was kind of the only online map product there was that was kind of good. And I think it's one of those things where they were maybe the first to do something, but someone bigger came and did the same thing, but a little better maybe. And then they died. It's always kind of a sad story when you hear that. But yeah, MapQuest probably joined the Yahoos and the used to be Bigs and the Ask Jeeves or all these other companies that used to be really cool. And now they're kind of dead. Yeah. You know you're down. If AOL buys you, you know you're probably in trouble, right?
It seems like it, Jen. I'm noticing a trend on our tech stuff from the 90s. If AOL buys you, it's because you're past your prime. Yeah, I remember printing up, because back then you, of course, didn't have your map on your phone, right? So you'd go into your computer, you'd put in where you're going and from, and you'd just print out the directions.
Yeah, you print it out
with you. Yep.
That's right. You print it out. Yeah. Because we didn't have smartphones yet. Right. Nothing that could show a map yet. Not quite yet at that time. Yeah. Oh, I miss MapQuest. I'm going to use it. I'm going to start. If it's still around, I'm going to use it.
It is. They do have apps for all of the phones, Android, iOS. So you can still use MapQuest if you want.
Well, I think we should. Let's use MapQuest. Let's have a MapQuest pact. Okay. Milo and listeners, let's download MapQuest and be MapQuestians. Let's do it.
How long that lasts.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I'll do it, man. I don't mind using MapQuest.
I'll do it.
Give it a try.
My next one's XM satellite radio. It's called because it merged with Sirius, so now it's Sirius XM satellite radio. But you have to remember, like satellite radio now is just a thing, right? But back then it was kind of a new thing. So for instance, Sirius came around the same time as XM, right? And Sirius, the guy who founded that, he actually went and said, hey, how about this, guys? All those radio signals that aren't in use, how about we get we make those like satellite signals, right? And so like radio people were like, what the heck is this guy trying to do? That's crazy stuff, man. That's nutsoid. And back then it was kind of nuts, right? And then like the origin of XM satellite radio was they actually like did some kind of petition to the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. And they said, hey, we want to actually have this petition around rules for like satellite radio, because we want to have this service where you have satellite radio coming to your place or your car, wherever. And it's like CD quality, and it's like subscription based. And it's like, you can listen to this really high quality satellite radio. So it was kind of a strange thing at the time, because people are like, ooh, satellite radio. And how's that different from normal radio and all this stuff, right? So they actually started working through that, and they kind of won their stuff, and they made this satellite early 90s. They made this satellite radio where you could get like CD quality sound to your box or even to your car later. I remember I used to work at like long haul trucking, and you even get like a tax subsidies for this kind of satellite radio if you're a trucker. And yeah, Howard Stern started doing his thing on satellite radio. So that's pretty cool. I mean, it's cool that it was new back then, right?
Yeah, I do remember how cool it was when people would get it. A buddy of mine had it installed in his car, and you had to get the receiver, because of course stereos then didn't have it pre-installed to work. Mm-mm. So you had to have a separate satellite radio receiver, and that was kind of one of the problems with it too. But yeah, I remember the Howard Stern thing, because it was all the news how much money they paid him to switch from regular radio over to satellite radio.
Yeah.
That was big time news back then, because he was huge back then, and so that was quite the acquisition for them. But it's funny now. Pretty much the only time I hear about satellite or anything to do with satellite radio is when renting a car. Sometimes car rentals will come with the XM satellite radio installed, set up on it, and that's about it. I don't think I know any actual person that uses satellite radio anymore.
Yeah. I don't know anybody either. Like, and I don't. And even the car that I got's kind of new. It's got all that stuff. But I guess I don't. I guess I'm okay with just like normal radio in my town.
Yeah.
And my airwaves in the area are good enough for me. So I don't have it, and I don't know anyone who has it. But there must be a market for it. I know truckers have it.
And that makes sense. I mean, if you're cruising across country, you don't want to have to change stations all the time. It's interesting how that they're still around, though, especially with how Spotify is now, because Spotify is kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Just you're not connecting to the satellite in the same way. So there's that. But
there's that.
Props for them for sticking it out. My next one's 1-800-Flowers. So a lot of people have probably ordered from 1-800-Flowers at some point in their life. Before going to the 1-800-Flowers website, you actually could call in. So that's how this company started out. Originally, it was a flower company in 1976. And then rolling into the 80s, they had the idea of, well, why don't we set up a 800 number and people could call in and order flowers to be delivered 24 hours, 7 days a week kind of a thing. And when the 90s rolled out, of course, they went online. So you can actually go to 1-800-Flowers.com and order your sweetheart some flowers. And it was pretty interesting transition, and props to the owner of the company, Jim McCann, for basically thinking of it and being really ahead of his times across the board. Not just, I mean, with the website where you can go and order flowers, but also the 800 number, like to come up with that in advance. It's interesting. He didn't actually have that phone number at the time. It was actually the 1-800-356-9377 that spells out the flowers. It was owned by a trucking company, speaking of truckers. And they basically had to buy the rights from the trucking company to get the phone number from them, which then somehow turned into a couple lawsuits. I'm not too sure why. Maybe there was some, disagreement as to what they were supposed to get from it. But they own a lot of stuff now. The company, the 1-800-Flowers, they own Design Pack Gifts. They own Flowerama. They own Alice's Table. They own, where's some more stuff that they own, but quite a few different companies are now owned by 1-800-Flowers. Like if you go to their website, it's literally just this list of things that you can now order through them and have it delivered.
Wow. Hey, and they're still around, still like kicking, still doing things.
They're still around. Yeah, you can still buy stock on the company. They're currently trading, I looked it up today, 13 something. I want to say like 13.50 is what it was. Something like that. It wasn't too expensive of a share price.
Get a little of that action.
I'm kind of impressed that they stuck around, because I know they, same thing, were struggling during that .com bubble when everything crashed, because they IPO'd at that time and everything crashed, and they kind of crashed a little bit with them, but they managed to stick it out and are still around. So good for them.
That's rad. My next one's GeekNet, which didn't start out as GeekNet. It went through a lot of stuff to become GeekNet. It was actually called VA Research when it was founded in 93 by the same people who founded Yahoo. And it was kind of a research thing. And what they wanted to do was sell like these personal computers that had Linux on them, right? So the Linux is another type of operating system, and it's kind of an alternative to like the Unix workstations, which were kind of big and expensive. So they wanted to do that, and they started doing that pretty well. And then they not only did they go IPO in 99, but they bought a bunch of other things that had to do with Linux, right? So they were kind of the Linux people. They even created something called Linux Labs division. So they were kind of the Linux people, right? Totally Linux people. And I've never really heard of this. And then they went IPO in 99, and they started out like this huge they started out way up there, like almost $300 a share. But then like over the course of like the year, they went down to like $9 or something, or something like this, right? It's like that typical .com where everything just started out too expensive, and then it kind of, people figured it out, and then it kind of plunged. But they still acquired, and they even had a partnership with the Japanese big corporation called Sumitomo, and they started growing. And then they went through all kinds of other someone bought them and they got bought and this and that. And then they finally became GeekNet in like 2009. So they became, after all this craziness, they became GeekNet. I don't even know what happened. Like, they went through all this other stuff. And then before you know it, like Hot Topic wanted to acquire them. The retailer,
like
Hot Topic.
Yeah.
And then guess who ended up buying them?
AOL.
No, GameStop.
Oh, GameStop.
GameStop bought them. And like 7 years ago, like for $20 a share, like $140 million. So this is one of those things that I'd have to look into more to figure out how they went from like this kind of sole Linux PC people, and over the years, how they just morphed and changed. And then before you know it, they're called GeekNet. They're owned by GameStop.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's very strange, but it would be interesting to look into this strange company a little more to figure it out. But it's just too much. There's too much weirdness to even go through. But they eventually, now that they're owned by GameStop, who's closing stores left and right. So
yeah, which is quite possibly not going to stay around too long.
Yeah. So you never know what happens, man. That's the crazy thing, especially businesses that went IPO in 99. They just turn into something else. You don't know where they're going to go. Some are good, some are bad.
Yeah, I'd never heard of them till now.
It's a strange company.
All right. Well, here's one. drcoop.com. It's funny, if you go to drcoop.com, which is still in existence, at the bottom of the website, it actually says this website is not associated with C. Everett Koop, MD, former Surgeon General of the United States, but previously was associated with Dr. C. Everett Koop, Surgeon General of the United States. So Dr. Koop was a Surgeon General in the Reagan era administration, and by all accounts, actually was a pretty decent Surgeon General. So he left office and decided to get involved with these guys, Donald Hackett, and form a health company, an online health company. They started the site and did really well. Like within the first few months, they had like 2 million visitors. So, and it was a health site. It was the equivalent of, what is it now? WebMD. It was a precursor to WebMD, or postcursor, whatever. But the point being, it was similar to WebMD. You go to the site, you get health information. And of course you had Dr. Koop's name associated with it. So there's a certain expectation of quality because he was a respected person. Although he didn't have a lot to do with the content on the site, he did do some stuff for it, which is pretty impressive considering he was 82 years old when the site launched. So this is like, the late 90s, 97 technically, when the site first launched. And you've got an 82-year-old man who is like that tech savvy former Reagan administration person. So, of course, it launched and did really well in the first few days of trading. But the site itself got a lot of criticism because this was early days of advertising as well. So think about now, some sites still do a little better job, and they're supposed to kind of call out, this is an ad, this is not an ad type of stuff, even though they, kind of intermix those still quite sneakily. So they would actually have paid content on there and didn't disclose it. So this would be some company selling vitamins or something like that, marketing them as here's a great article about the greatness of these vitamins and you should take it. And it's got Dr. Koop's name linked to it, that kind of stuff. But since it kind of was that type of a site and got a bit of flack over it. And of course, you had the WebMDs and those other ones. They went through money really quick. And it only took, about a year or so after their IPO that they tanked, and their stock price went from $20 before the year 2000 and to buy, so 99, so basically right after they IPO'd, tanked to 65.6 cents in August of 2000. So
there's the .com bust in a nutshell.
This site is an example of the .com bust.
Yeah.
This is exactly that type of a company. We're going to launch it. We're going to make tons of money, although we're not really doing anything that makes money, and we tank. So it was kind of funny. The site eventually did go. The company went bankrupt and was sold in 2002 for $186,000 to a company called Vitacost, which sells vitamins. Basically, it's a vitamin retailer. Dr. Coop actually did try to block that, or at least get his name removed from it, because he basically didn't want his name associated to a company that just sells vitamins. It didn't really work, but he did still do really well from the company because he sold most of his stock in 2000, kind of before it tanked. So he did still make like according to the article I read, $850,000 when he sold his stock in the company.
So it's all right for not doing much.
Not much at all. Yeah. So he died in 2013 at the age of 96.
Oh, well, maybe he was a good, healthy kind of health doctor if he's living on to almost 100.
Took care of himself indeed. But so I just love the disclaimer. This Dr. Coop is has no association to Dr. Coop.
yeah. It's like Jamie and Milo actually have no association with Jamie and Milo.
Pretty much. Yeah.
My next company is called Webvan, which is a very interesting company to me. They're a grocery business, and they started in 1996. And their whole thing was that they would deliver groceries in certain markets within 30-minute windows, right? Online. Does that sound familiar?
This does sound familiar.
Yeah, we do it a lot now. But back then it was a new concept. It only lasted 3 years, though. It went bankrupt in 2001. Now, I was like, why did that happen? Because this was really a forward thinking company, right? I mean, think about it. Way before we actually have the ubiquity of grocery delivery, which is something you can do easily now. This company came out like quarter century ago and tried to do it, right? So it was really ahead of its time. But I think the problem was it was started and run by like techies, like technocrats who really had no experience in the grocery business at all, and they didn't really hire anyone who was. The other thing is they really wanted to expand, so they had like one market in San Francisco, and then they were like, yeah, okay, we're going to go to every other market in the United States now, right? So they tried to do that aggressive expansion, but they didn't really prove out their model in the one market they were in before they tried to do that, right? Also, and this is maybe kind of true today, they were targeting kind of value customers, like kind of price sensitive customers, when this kind of delivery at the time should have been more toward, hey, you're a busy kind of wealthier person, like we'll deliver your groceries, right? So their target market was kind of off. And then the whole like supply chain logistics issues that came with all of that. So I think it was such a good idea and the company was so forward thinking, but this is a good example of like a company that had a good idea and it would become ubiquitous later. It would become something that happens a lot later. They just couldn't execute it well, but I respect them for trying because it really was forward thinking at the time. It really was something that was way ahead of its time. It just wasn't executed well, but you have to respect them at least for thinking about something that would become very prevalent in the future. Good job, Webvan. Even though you only lasted a short time, the founders of Webvan, I think you all were thinking like way ahead, and maybe you're just too far ahead of your time at the time.
Wonder where they are now. Like if they went on to other big adventures and other
Well, the founders.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably. It was founded by a guy named Louis Borders. He founded Borders.
Borders the bookstore.
The bookstore, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so he went on to other stuff, I guess.
Well, he founded Borders.
He founded Borders first.
A long time ago, first in the early 70s.
Okay.
But then he tried to he founded this web van. So I don't know. Louis Borders seems to be like the guy who, like, he founded Borders in the 70s, which is a great bookstore, but then later got killed by Amazon. And then he found Webvan, which might have got killed by Amazon if it had lasted, right? So it seems like maybe Louis Borders kind of has a forward-thinking kind of thing going on, right?
Yeah.
So he's not a dumb guy at all. So I just wish I could be smart like Mr. Borders.
Yeah.
All we could do is make podcasts.
Talk about smart people.
Talk about smart people that we aren't.
Yeah. We do a little reading about smart people and then talk about them.
That's as far as we go.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've probably never heard of mine. It's called Flues. Flues.com. So what Flues was and I say was because it went away. It did not last long. And basically, the idea was that it was a currency, but how it worked was more like frequent flyer miles or those types of things. So what you would do is you would go to online businesses and buy things, and then you would get Flues points. And then you could go to flues.com and buy things with those Flues points. Pretty simple business model. The problem was, of course, they just couldn't get enough merchants on the site. And it was still kind of one of those 99 kind of era. It's like, what is this Flues points thing? And then I got to go over here and I got to spend them on stuff. You could buy Flues if you want. So you could actually just go and say, I want to however many Flues and pay cash for Flues that you could then go to flues.com and buy stuff with, which also made it sound ridiculous. What's fun about this one is that Whoopi Goldberg was the spokesperson for the company. So you can actually go on YouTube now and look up Whoopi Goldberg Flues ads and see some of her ads of hawking Flues. What a terrible name, by the way.
I know. It makes me feel like I should go get a vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any Flues? No, and I don't want any. It did not last long. Closed its doors in August 26th of 2001.
Is that kind of a proto cryptocurrency kind of thing?
Kind of is, actually. So another one is a bit ahead of its time. I like the frequent flyer comparison because that makes sense. Because I know I had a frequent flyer, or I had a credit card, and you get points. And I remember that you could go to their site and buy shit off the site with your frequent flyer points.
Okay, it's kind of like that, huh?
Yeah, so it's kind of like that, but for internet companies. But they didn't really they didn't get enough merchants involved in it, and just kind of faded away. Well, I didn't fade away. Actually, it bombed.
It didn't gracefully just kind of skip into the sunset. It just belly flopped in the pool,
yeah,
and drowned. Hey man, that's the .com bubble. I don't know if we'll ever see another one of those again, but it was good to be around.
Yeah, it was fun to be there at the time and see it happening. Luckily, probably a good thing I didn't invest in stocks. I wasn't a buyer of stocks.
we were kind of broke back then.
Exactly.
Fortunately for us.
Yeah, because I could have potentially invested in a company that bombed and been like, damn you, .com bubble.
All your money. I invested in a company that didn't do anything. And then it failed. What's up with that?
Damn you, Flues. What am I supposed to do with all these Flues I have now?
I got all these Flues points, man. I'm a Flues point millionaire. It's like Confederate dollars, meaningless.
Yeah, exactly.